and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my usual guests. We've got the man in black, Raph Honigstein. Hello, Raph.
Hi.
And we've also got Andy Brassell, European football expert.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, and you?
I'm okay. This is actually our last show before Christmas. So Merry Christmas, and obviously we'll be back after January. So what we're going to do today is review everything that's happened this past year. So if people like me who have the memory of a fish, I'm going to be leaning on these two. We're going to be discussing best players, best moments, as well as all the action from the weekend. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, let's start off with Barcelona Santos. Did you watch that?
I did, yes.
What did you think? Spectacular, wasn't it?
Well, didn't you enjoy it?
No, it was. It was a very good match. I got a lot of abuse for the fact that people think I don't like Barcelona, but I do. Barca. I'm never going to say that again, that's for sure.
Good. No, they were very impressive. And they made Santos look like a really ordinary team. And Neymar didn't get a kick. And, of course, Pelé had said before the game that Neymar is a more complete player than Messi. And never did the old man look as foolish as after yesterday's performance. I mean, Barcelona were unbelievable. They were playing a 3-7-0 formation. No striker, 7 midfielders, constantly changing. It's almost as if they set themselves their own little tasks for every game, because it's not even in doubt that they'll win it. And they were vastly superior and incredible.
You see, they really were vastly superior,
they were,
as opposed to in the Clasico, and they were vastly superior to Real Madrid, as Xavi said at the time, which I don't think is true. But they really were unbelievable. But I also think, like, you know, I'm always someone who's like, oh, this is the end of their cycle. But I've started to think that they're just starting a new one. And I'm starting to worry that they're never going to go off the scene, that there's never going to be another team that's going to teach us something new, because Barcelona's continually improving.
Well, it's a question, isn't it? Because if you think, you know, Cesc was so important to them because he came from their culture. Yeah. He understood their game, but he's taking a time to readjust, even to learn how to play the Barcelona way again. He's still Premier League Cesc to a certain extent, and they're still trying to find the best place to fit him. So he's still going to improve as well. But I wonder what this is going to do for the image of the World Club Championship in Europe, because it's never taken as seriously in Europe, and particularly in England, we have to say, as it is in South America, where it's something that South American teams build towards
Neymar
all
and
year, like the Rio Carnival. It's the same thing, you know. It's the big deal, and you know, like Danilo, who signed for FC Porto in the summer, he hung on to play in this and scored a great goal in the semi, of course. And so, you know, if it's something that's, you know, genuinely aspirational now, you know, Barcelona set that standard, and it can make the difference.
Well, let's have a look at the goals actually from yesterday, because they were pretty spectacular, if I do say so myself. Right. So this is the first one, where it's just so easy for them to penetrate, and their attempt to actually stop that goal. They were basically having fun, and apparently, from what I know, is that they were allowed to they didn't even have a curfew. They were allowed to do what they wanted, go out all night, and they were really enjoying their football on this occasion.
Yeah, I think that's the only way that you can actually deal with this team now, because if you'd been too strict, they probably, I wouldn't say they didn't want to be there, but you know, there's probably an element of fatigue and of wariness of having all these games, especially if you're a Spanish international and you've been, as we said earlier,
caught up in all of that.
Yeah, flying around the world throughout this year. And you need to give them that bit of freedom, I think, on and off the pitch, to really get the best out of them.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what's also nice is did you see when Fabregas scores, they just all jump on. There's such a team unity going on. Look at that one. Santos's defending is actually appalling.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, Barcelona have a habit of making teams look that bad. I mean, remember how they made United look from 20 minutes on.
Yeah, but I mean, United's defence. Yes, I see what you mean. They do have a habit of making that. But I just thought that they were going to cruise to that. They were just cruising to that victory. They didn't even. I don't see them stopping, because they're just continuing to bring in new people. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So tell us about the media reaction in Spain after Barcelona's triumph.
Well, incredibly, it's actually made the front covers of the Madrid press saying what a fantastic performance it was over in Japan, and that's almost unheard of. There was a little bit of reason behind that. Marca during the week had started spreading some malicious stories about David Villa's future at the club, and Pep Guardiola came out and said the paper basically lies. So I think they were feeling a little bit apologetic. So they made the front covers on Monday, so there was no Cristiano Ronaldo there for once.
Well, can I just say that's a little bit like Ronaldo actually came out and scored a hat-trick against Sevilla. What does that say about him? You know, Messi did amazingly against Santos, obviously, as we always know that he can. Ronaldo scored a hat-trick against Sevilla, which is a big game. I know that everyone keeps calling him not a big game player, but that is a big game. So, you know, how do you compare the two?
It's impossible to compare. It's impossible to compare the opposition. I must confess, I didn't get to see the big final in Japan because I actually went to a proper game of football down at the Vicente Calderon, which was taking place at the same time. So just saw highlights. So it's impossible to say at what level Santos would be against a club like Sevilla, for example. From what you can tell, really, is that Santos obviously are not used at all to playing against sides like Barcelona, where Real Madrid now have got used to it, and other teams have as well, like Sevilla, who drew 0-0 in the Camp Nou. So two different teams, two leagues, and really hard to compare.
Over the year, how would you compare Ronaldo to Messi? Do you really think that Messi is so much better?
I don't like saying better. They're just two different players. Well, Messi's certainly won the awards, you could say, the Champions League final and all the trophies, the league as well, and look at the record in his Clásicos over the years, especially in 2001. So Leo Messi has performed in that way, but Cristiano Ronaldo, I've been watching him all year, and he's been a joy to watch sometimes. Yes, you're often playing against smaller and lesser opposition, but so is Leo Messi. So I don't really like this who's better, who's not. They are very, very different players playing different positions and offer, a great deal differently to their teams.
What about you guys? What do you think?
Well, my problem with Ronaldo is that he makes the easy look complicated, and Messi makes the complicated look easy. I think that really sums him up. Ronaldo seems to play his own game, seems to play for the YouTube compilations of the best scenes. He's someone who's playing an individual game most of the time, and of course that can be very effective if you're as good as he is. But if I was a manager, or if I was a sporting director buying a player and I could choose between the two, 100 times out of 100 times I would pick Lionel Messi.
Well, I think that's a really harsh way of evaluating it, because Cristiano Ronaldo seems to be stereotyped as individualistic because he's an obsessive trainer, because he's extremely dedicated. And
he's also extremely dedicated to his image. And
that's just the people make it. That's it, because he's got this reputation. People don't take him seriously because he likes to look good, because he's going out with a supermodel, whereas Lionel Messi's just the nicest little boy,
He sits around in his tracksuit trousers playing PlayStation when he's not on the pitch.
And it's just that's how you end up judging them, sadly.
Yeah, but
Ronaldo
came out this year and said, people are envious because I'm rich and good looking. That's a problematic statement. You're not going to win too many friends.
But that is true, though. People are
a lot of things might be true, but I'm not going to say that, are they?
Why should his job be winning friends? He's there to be an effective player for
his team.
Yes, but he would be more, with less ego and more humility. My point is he'd be a more effective player. And when it comes to the Messi Ronaldo,
sorry, I have to say this, but when it comes to Messi Ronaldo, Messi grew up with that, with the Barcelona method. He's been there since a child. Ronaldo has managed to be amazing in 2 or 3 different leagues. He's just found it, at a time when even Zidane struggled with the Italian league at the beginning. He's just seamlessly moved in, and more than that, he doesn't just score goals, he also provides a lot of assists if you look at the way that he's played so far.
Yeah, and I think he's improved his assists year on year, statistically as well. And what I like so much about Ronaldo is he's so dedicated. He's improved every little bit of his game, and he's done it all himself. If you talk about him being an individual, the product of that is he's muscled up, of course, from when he first arrived in England. And of course, his highlight of this year perhaps was scoring the winner in the Spanish Cup final, which perhaps is the one goal that Lionel Messi couldn't score, a back post header.
Unfortunately, that's also his only highlight, whereas Lionel Messi had tons of them.
Cynical.
The point is really, they're both great players, and it comes down to taste, I think, what Tim said. You can compare the numbers, and, they're pretty even. Then it comes down to taste. And I think these things do matter, because who do you want in a dressing room? Do you want the easygoing guy who's going to sit around in his tracksuit playing PlayStation, or you want the guy looking in the mirror and worrying about his hair all the time?
Yeah, but you don't.
I want
Ronaldo
Messi.
is maybe outspoken, but he's someone who also encourages his teammates. Anyway, this is something that we're never gonna agree on. Tim, tell us about the rest. What about Villarreal's demise? And now I know from what I understand is that Nilmar's going to be sold to Roma.
Potentially not. His agent did come out recently and said, although Nilmar would very much like a move, they're not in a selling position at the moment, Villarreal. They moved off Santi Cazorla over the summer to get him off the books and to raise a bit of transfer revenue. So his agent said that's going to be this was a couple of weeks ago, so of course it could have changed. Nilmar would like the move, not too happy at Villarreal at the moment. But the club's unlikely to sell. They don't need the money. And also, with Giuseppe Rossi out and the Villarreal now facing a relegation battle, it would be a disastrous move to sell Nilmar. Certainly over the summer, you can see him moving on, perhaps Rossi as well, as Villarreal look to rebuild. But I'd be very surprised if he goes in January anyway. It would be a suicidal move from the club.
It'll be catastrophic because they really are very dependent so far on these key players that they do have left. Do you see them coming out of this sort of... They've plunged into the pit of despair. Do you see them coming out of it?
They will stay up. They're worth teams, basically, in La Liga. But they're good in patches, but they're just in a terrible nosedive at the moment. So maybe the Christmas break will get a few players like Cani back to fitness. Rossi might return towards the end of the season. Nilmar certainly was out for some of it. He needs to get back to full fitness. They have the players. Borja Valero as well is one of the best players outside of the top two in La Liga. They've got the quality, and I said there are worse teams. So I expect them to be moving towards mid-table by the end of May. I think they'll be fine.
Tim, what's the debate in Spain about the league on a whole, especially when it comes to because in the past, I know the narrative was, yes, the English might be better in the Champions League or they might have more team, but throughout all competitions, if you look at the Europa League and what Seville have done, etc., we are the better side. But now you look at what Villarreal have done in the Champions League and Valencia were knocked out. How's the view right now of where La Liga is?
They still think it's the best league in the world because they still say it has the best players in the world, the big marketable players. But they're fully aware, unfortunately, that there is only two clubs in La Liga and the rest is much of a muchness. You saw Sevilla, who were good for 20 minutes, but then completely fell apart, and Valencia didn't really deliver against Chelsea when they had a big chance to say, you know what, we're third in the league and we can take on your third place team, but they didn't. Villarreal faded. Atletico Madrid are in the Europa League, but they're a disaster. They got Athletic Bilbao there as well. So there is realistic sort of feeling that the Premier League, team for team, especially top 10, is stronger. But we'll see what happens in the Europa League. But one of the big champions for the fact that wanting to equal the pay between the clubs, the Sevilla president, Jose Maria del Nido, he's been very vocal. Unfortunately, he's just today been condemned to 7.5 years in prison for fraud. So the last person perhaps who was standing up against the top two is now out of the picture. So you can see Barcelona and Real Madrid just carrying on for the next 10 years as they are now.
Between those two guys, who do you think will win the Liga then? It's obviously always going to be between Barcelona and Real Madrid.
I think it's going to be Real Madrid this year. I think perhaps the way that Real Madrid are playing away from home, they're going out there and just smashing sides. They're not really taking anything for granted. Where, although of course Barcelona were impressive for most of the game against the Santiago Bernabeu, I'm still not sure perhaps the motivation levels are there to carry them through those tricky games against the teams like Osasuna, even sides like Mallorca or Malaga. So yeah. I still think Real Madrid are going to nick it.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Tim. We'll see you in the new year.
Thank you.
Okay, what about you guys? Tell us in a word.
In a word, Real Madrid, there's 2 words.
It has to be Barcelona if it's one word.
You kind of have to say Barcelona, I've set it up.
In a phrase.
Okay, honestly, Real Madrid?
Possibly. I have doubts.
Don't
since
stick
the
your neck out here.
Just say one. Don't worry, we won't punish you.
Barcelona.
Of course, I'm going to say I think it's going to be Real Madrid.
Why, of course.
Just because they're at the top of the league and I'm someone who's very pragmatic in that way. Right, okay, come back after the break and we'll be discussing all the other leagues, including Italy. So we'll see you in a few. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki, and basically Raf just had a little bit of an attack because we were going to discuss Italy and decided that we should discuss Germany instead. So we will now.
It's much more exciting.
Yes, someone's view. Clearly not Europe's. But anyway, do tell us, has it been a vintage year?
It's been a very good year because Dortmund are very impressive and showed just how open the league is. It was the 4th champion in 3 years. So, you know, you have a lot of variety at the top. You also have a very young team. It was the youngest team ever to win a German title, just over 23 years old on average. So a tremendous number of young kids coming through. Young manager who's very exciting. He's tipped for great things. He was even linked with a Liverpool job not long ago. They were scouting him. So Jurgen Klopp, I think, is a man who's going places, along with most of these Dortmund players. And there's no coincidence that the likes of Mario Götze, Kevin Grosskreutz, Shinji Kagawa, they're all being linked with big moves abroad.
God, I wouldn't even be able to pronounce those again.
Soon.
Now, you can argue that it's a greatly competitive league because it's a different team that's always winning it. But is that really something that you use when you, like, if it's different teams always winning, would you say that it's a great league?
Yes.
Would you say that it's a shambles?
Shambles?
No, I mean, you know,
no,
as
it's
in
a very,
kind of,
it's a, it
just
shows
means
you that.
I mean, you know, you can win and then you can get relegated. I don't know whether that kind of, you know, like look at Wolfsburg, for example. They did so well and then they fell so bad. I don't know whether that's something that is really symptomatic of a great league.
No, you're right in one way that the teams who come up quickly have a real problem staying there.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the Champions League. We saw Dortmund struggle, and as you said, Wolfsburg 2 years before struggled as well. But slowly and surely, I think we're coming back to a state where there's going to be Bayern and 2 or 3 other teams who establish themselves. But, you know, it always works 2 ways. Here, in the Premier League, you have a very fixed hierarchy. These teams qualify for the Champions League all the time. That's why they do very well in the Champions League all the time.
Sure.
But the league on a whole, you could say, suffers a little bit because when it comes to number 8 against number 10, it's not really that exciting again. Here you have much more fluctuation. The league just released their figures for average attendance, a new record, 45,000. Wow. 151 turned up on average for every single game. That's huge.
Yeah, it's very much the model.
I think that might even beat the NFL to make it the biggest league of all this year. So it shows you that they're doing something right. And you can debate.
No,
you
for
can
sure
debate
it's a model
everything else,
to copy in that sense. But I'm like, Mönchengladbach, can they actually stay up there? Can they sustain that to those levels? Andy, what do you think?
I think you have to say Wolfsburg and Stuttgart are exceptions because they both won the league at Stuttgart in 2007 and Wolfsburg in 2009 by a really stormy end to the season. So they were sort of in and around the top 6 and then they just powered through in the last 3 months. Whereas Dortmund, there's a sense of a dynasty there. A sense of something that's been growing organically over a number of years. They started the season well and that they kept it going through the rest of the season.
Sure.
And I think the fact that they've lost Şahin and Barrios has started 1 game this season and yet they've managed to regenerate without spending a lot of money because of course they don't want to go back to where they were at the late 90s and the early part of the 21st century. I think that's something that shows there's something lasting there.
They also have like a terrific youth system from what I understand with Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, no, they have 2 things. They have a good youth system themselves, which most of the clubs do, but also they buy very smartly. They look very carefully, and rather than spending 10 million on a South American who's unproven, they'll go and buy a young German kid for 5, maybe 4 million euros. And it's a policy that's worked out well for them. And most of the clubs, including Bayern to a certain extent, have started copying them and said, you know, forget all that scouting in Brazil and South America. Let's concentrate on the quality that we actually have on our doorstep. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Hi, Nicholas. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you. So tell us, what are the highlights, you know, the best teams in Germany over this past year, best moments? Review us for what do you think?
Well, the most memorable thing from 2011 is the way Gladbach have played for me. I mean, they were down on 10 points at the beginning of last year's Rückrunde, and I remember that we had an interview with Raphael on our website on the Bundesliga Fanatic where he said that they were doomed, but they managed to stay in the league, and look at the way they're playing now. That was one highlight, and the other highlights I would say is Dortmund, and the way the team played for each other, the way they actually managed to defeat Bayern Munich twice in the Allianz Arena in the same calendar year. And obviously taking the 4th Champions League spot from Italy is also a huge highlight for German football, I'm sorry to say.
I think that might be the greatest disappointment for the rest of Europe, though. But yes, no, go on, do continue.
For the rest of Europe.
Well, I mean, surely with the way that the Champions League results go, you would much rather see the likes of Napoli or Udinese up there than seeing, let's say, Werder Bremen in their fabulous defending, don't you think? Well, on that note, what's been the greatest disappointment in Germany?
Well, we can start in Europe. I mean, the way German teams still do not manage to get good results in the Champions League, although that's starting to change. That is disappointing, and especially Dortmund not qualifying for the next round in this year's Champions League. I would say that was a huge disappointment. Not even getting a Europa League spot. That was very disappointing for me.
What about you? Did you think what was your greatest disappointment for the year?
Yes, it was, but I think also Bayern Munich's performance in the Champions League, if you look at 2010-11, was incredibly bad. If you think that Inter were so poor that they lost against Schalke, what was it, 11-1 on aggregate or something ridiculous like that, and Bayern still couldn't manage to get past them in the last 16, showed you just how much trouble this team and certainly the coach were in. You know, a shambolic side like Schalke made it to the semi-final. Yeah. So
they had Raphael.
I think it was Bayern's way to the final almost. You know, if they come up against United, I would have given them a decent chance. So they really underachieved, as Nicolas said, and that's something that has to change. But you know, the one thing we've got going for us is, of course, with the Euros. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. But you know, Germany, the national team, will come to the forefront, and so far, that's just been a never-ending story of just improving.
That's what we can discuss later. Thank you so much, Nicolas. We hope to speak to you in the new year. Merry Christmas. Well, now they have 2 left in the Champions League, though. Quite hard fixtures. But France have 2 left, rather controversially.
Controversially, you say?
No, there was nothing odd about that 7-1 win.
Nothing. Absolutely. It was very run-of-the-mill because people always score 7-1. It happens in Serie A all the time.
Bafétimbi Gomis always scores 4 goals.
Of course.
So tell us, what has been your highlight of France and who's sort of the standout performances, best teams?
Well, in Europe, again, it's been a little bit short. You know, Marseille have played with such circumspection. You know, they've clearly got a strong side. They've got a coach in Didier Deschamps who has a strong link to the Champions League. You know, he was captain of the only French team that's ever won it as well, in '93 with Marseille. So, I mean, the fact that they got through in such exciting circumstances against Dortmund, that was great, but I think it glosses over a multitude of sins. And the same with Lyon. I mean, as you know, I think that was completely kosher because Dinamo are a very poor side who played an hour with 10 men. But nevertheless, I think, you know, it's funny now that Lyon could get to the quarter-final of the Champions League, having beaten Dinamo twice and, well, Apoel, they would have to.
I know it's the Manchester United tie. I mean, if Man United was still there, they would have probably gotten someone like Apple, no. But Lyon got them instead. But we've got Andrew. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Evening, Mina. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you disappointed with Lyon not qualifying? Would that be your greatest disappointment of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad they had it in their own hands and just couldn't score against Trabzonspor. I think they had like 20+ shots on goal, so they had the chances. Yeah, it'd have been really. They capped off a great week with obviously Marseille and Lyon coming back, and then to have 3 French teams would have been unthinkable, really.
Okay, and tell us, do you think PSG are the team to take it? Are they the highlight of the year so far? Or do you think they've been rather disappointing considering they've got such amazing talent?
I mean, they started quite well. They were doing okay, but they've had problems with Antoine Kombouaré, the coach. He's never been the favourite. The talks with Ancelotti that did happen. There's a lot of unrest. But I think you still have to give Lille the kind of team of the year in France so far, that they won the league and the cup. PSG are a work in progress, I would say. There's a lot of problems there. If they get it right, they can be a phenomenal success, but there's a lot of things that could still go wrong, I think.
Andrew's dead right. I think Paris, because of it being Paris, it's just it's globally got such incredible potential. But that's all it is for the moment. And I was at the Parc des Princes last night for PSG versus Lille. It's incredible. You think how much money PSG have spent on players. The key players that Lille lost in the summer after winning that double in the likes of Cabaye, Rami, Gervinho, of course. And they went there and they had nearly 60% possession. I think it was 58% possession.
Wow.
And they looked like the team. Whereas PSG were just hammering it forward to their brilliant front four and sort of hoping the magic would happen from there. They were so incredibly disjointed. And, you don't feel there's that real harmony behind the scenes. I was talking to Joe Cole afterwards and he was saying, all the squad are part of it. And, if I come off after 60, 65 and we want to close out a draw, or if Dimitri Payet starts instead of me, that's cool as well. I'm there to encourage the young players too. And I think you look at Lille, and it's not just the fact that they've won. It's not just the fact that they've won the double. It's not just the fact that they've won the double playing great football, but the whole structure of the club is completely in place. They've done it without going into masses of debt. They run the books really well. They're moving into a 50,000 state-of-the-art stadium next year. It's looking really good for them. But of course, with Euro 2016 coming up, a lot of these clubs are going to have improved stadiums. So maybe this could be a way for France to push up to the next level.
I think PSG, what they need is a young, vibrant, pacey guy in the middle who can pull the strings, maybe like someone like David Beckham. For next season.
Perhaps. But funnily enough, Javier Pastore, who looks very, very unhappy at the moment, who should be that young guy, he's becoming a big problem there. And of course, he's the transfer deal of not just of the season, of any season in France. But he looks so unhappy.
So do you think he's like a great disappointment? Would you say he's one of the worst players at the moment?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but he was booed off for the first time yesterday when he was substituted, and he trudged sort of flat-footed towards the bench, looking thoroughly miserable. At least when Gamero got taken off the other week, he had the sort of guts to throw a bottle and stuff. And Pastore just put on his coat.
Oh, so now you're encouraging them to act like thugs.
I don't want to be here.
Andrew, who has been the most disappointing players or the worst teams? What has been like the bad points? Would you say Javier Pastore and his hair?
Yeah, it's all about the hair. He's lost the hair and he's lost all the skills. I mean, Pastore, you can't call him the worst because it was at the end of September, October. He was just phenomenal against Montpellier, against Lyon. He was superb. The goal against Evian, where he beat like 3 players and then brought PSG back to a draw. He's had some really good moments, but as Andy said, it seems to be unraveling a little bit. He says he's not enjoying the style and he's getting booed, but PSG fans boo anything these days with the looks of it. I think there's still a chance that Pastore can. There was some glimpses last night of the Pastore that we know. There was some little touches, but just not enough consistency. Teams that have done bad. I mean, the start that Marseille had to the season was just disastrous. They've done so well to get back to where they are now. They're kind of within touching distance.
They have Deschamps, so of course they were going to climb back up.
You wouldn't have said that at the start of the season, Mina.
No, I probably wouldn't, but yes, no.
The young defender, Nicolas Nkoulou, he came in from Monaco, who went down last season. He's started to look pretty superb at the back, and him coming back, and they've got Souleymane Diawara. They two are looking at quite a good partnership, and I think that there was a stat after the start that Marseille had. No one's ever finished in the top 3, and the win over Lorient at the weekend has put that possibility that they could actually do it. They could come back and make a bit of a strong run.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew, for your input. Merry Christmas, and I hope we speak to you in the new year.
All the best.
Thank you. So who do you think is going to win it?
I think Lille have to be favourites after that performance last night because they're really a team and they really believe. And Cole was saying he went there because he was completely seduced by their coach, Rudy Garcia's vision of like this mini Barcelona.
Oh, everything is mini Barcelona.
I know. But I think it's more than that. You look at how hard they work. Eden Hazard, who is the best player in the championship, he came off the pitch absolutely covered head to foot in mud last night because he was running back the whole way. And I think that was really the difference. You looked at PSG trying to buy him in the summer. They ended up with Pastore, who's a hugely talented player, but maybe not that suited to what they're trying to do. And they're poles apart. And I think that could make the difference. PSG will sack Antoine Kombouaré as coach, but causing more instability is the last thing they need.
Well, that's a shame. It seems that sacking is the order of the day, and Italy sacked their 9th coach. But we'll be talking more about that after the break. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we come to the interesting section. Of course, I'm not biased at all when I say it's now Italy's time. So, what have been the highlights? Oh, Raph, that's just mean. That's just mean. What would you say has been the standout team over the whole year? Like, obviously, everyone's going to mention Napoli being really amazing in the Champions League.
Yeah, do you just want to answer for me?
Yeah, I will actually. Yeah. And I also think that Udinese have been impeccable. But do answer the question before I get to it.
Well, yeah, Napoli was going to be my suggestion. I think they've surprised everyone just how good that renaissance is. I think people thought there was a lot of hype, but the way they knocked out City in the Champions League and keep going strong, albeit with a bit of collateral damage. I think the fallout from the Champions League is beginning to show a little bit in Serie A.
Yeah, a lot.
It's still impressive what they've done. Again, a little bit like Lille on a balanced budget, with no huge cash injections, no sugar daddies. I think it's very, very exciting what they've done.
But also what is so impressive about Napoli is that they have an identity which is so rare at the moment. And then when they were talking about Manchester City, it's they're still trying to forge an identity, whereas, for example, De Laurentiis, which is the president, said at the start that I wanted Mazzarri because he plays with 3 men. And had he said no, I would have gone for Gianpiero Gasperini, who's of course the ill-fated Inter Milan coach that got sacked. But that's just the point. They know exactly where they're going, whereas Inter sort of just go, whichever coach is available, we'll bring him on.
But don't you think a part of that as well is, that they've always got classic Napoli, you think, the icon Maradona, and Cavani is the biggest icon they have had since Maradona, and that's a huge part of that. The season he had last season and everything he represents, everything epitomises the fact he's had a calzone named after him in the city. Is something that's really important for the spirit of Napoli, isn't it?
He's very much an icon, but it's very much of a Lavezzi. Like he should really thank Lavezzi, because Lavezzi is the man that sort of does everything for Napoli.
I'm not directly comparing him with Maradona. I'm just saying to have some sort of talisman is an important thing for the club and the club's identity.
No, I agree with that. That's the same thing with Udinese. Hello, Tancredi, how are you?
All fine. Buonanotte from Milano.
Buonanotte. This is our Gazzetta dello Sport writer. Do tell us. So Andy was telling us about the calzone that's in Cavani. That's for Cavani in honour of him. Have you ever had it? Have you ever been to Napoli and had that?
Sorry, I didn't catch. Say again.
The calzone named after Cavani in Napoli.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's not only that thing. I was there for Napoli, Manchester City, and I just did a couple of tours around. There is a lot named after the players. They do all this presepe, that is all this Holy Family, little puppets and statues that they do in Napoli. There was just full of Cavani, Lavezzi and Hamšík around Jesus Christ just born. So they are actually, it was full of that things.
Do you think Napoli are the standout team of the year? Or would you say another team was better or more surprising?
Well, I think that actually I go for Udinese, because there is no doubt that in the last 12 months, so I would consider just 2011, last 12 months, the best football at all was played by Udinese against whatever kind of team, small teams, big teams. There is also this difference, because sometimes there are these good playing teams that then when they face more level sides, they just lose motivations. Instead, Udinese went through all the way, and of course, as Rafa was reminding, losing in the meanwhile Zapata, Alexis Sanchez, Inler. On the other side, I would say that the best manager, even if Francesco Guidolin, the Udinese's manager, is a great one, probably for me in the second place, but the best manager I would say is probably Walter Mazzarri, because what Napoli did in Champions League.
Walter Mazzarri is the best coach?
Yeah, because the thing, the gear that achieved Napoli in Champions League. It's just something that
no, but you're giving him far too much credit for an identity that Napoli have, whereas Guidolin actually gave them an identity. Moreover, he managed to cope with that team despite their losses, despite the big teams, despite the pressure. Whereas Mazzarri walked in, whereas all the team knew exactly how they were already playing. They've always played the same formation. They've always had the 4 tenors, you know. So I don't think that Mazzarri injected much more than, I agree that he's good tactically. I think sometimes he can be too offensive and leaves gaping holes at the back, whereas Guidolin is more balanced and he's less dependent on players and more on the actual philosophy.
And I think that is the point. A matter of philosophy, a matter of temperaments, a matter of team spirit. I mean, what Napoli did in Champions League really is not a coincidence, and it's nothing easy. It was a death group, we all know, but the way they played in the moment, they were expected to play good. And I mean, in the game home against Manchester City, was really such a revelation, because on some way against Bayern Munich, they may have been also a bit lucky probably, but they have kept together, and that you can do just if you have temperament and philosophy. That is coming only from the manager. Just the manager can do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I do agree with that. But who would you say is the sort of the best players of this year, if you'd like to say so, like breakout stars?
Yeah, well, I know that Totò Di Natale had amazing statistics, but still I can't do less than go with Zlatan Ibrahimovic, because I mean, his footprint, his huge footprint, is over all the Milan Scudetto, because really he changed completely Milan race. We don't have to forget that even if last season Inter seemed a band apart, in the end closed very tight to Milan. And that a few points of difference was all made by the gap that was digged by Zlatan Ibrahimovic in the first part of the season. Yeah. That gave a confidence to Milan that they could have just used all over the rest of the season. And this year as well, he's just playing a bit more as number 10 and giving the options to Allegri to work on other tactics.
What about you, Andy? Who do you think has been?
Well, I think that's a very good point. Of course, it's the 8th successive year that Ibra's won the title in the country he's been playing, which is a phenomenal record. It's absolutely astonishing, and people talk about him.
Remember, he's overrated.
Divisive figure, exactly, and really, like, his second season at Juventus is probably the only season where he's really sort of fallen below standard. But I wanted to ask, as we're coming from Milan, I wanted to ask about Max Allegri as well. We didn't touch on him as coach, and you look at the egos in that Milan dressing room. You look at the fact that he had to step up and take over. He's done a phenomenal job, hasn't he?
Well, it's a good job. I wouldn't call that phenomenal.
You see, this is it. He'll never get credit for it. Yes, go on. Sorry, Tancredi.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that the real value for a manager in a situation like this, when you have such a player like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, in some way is a situation comparable to the Roberto Mancini's one at Inter 3 years ago. Ibrahimovic made the difference when the manager can really make the difference in Europe, in the Cups. And in the last season, Milan simply shouldn't have been kicked out by Tottenham, and in the way they did. Now, Allegri had the chance to rewrite again the story, but this is still everything we have to see against Arsenal. But I mean, there in Europe, there in Champions League, we will really see about Allegri. For sure, he did a good job, because when you win a Scudetto, it has to be in that way, and because, as you said, he had a lot of personalities to manage with. But the difference between a good and a great manager will be made by the results in European Cup.
Sure.
Tancredi, worst team, I don't like saying it, but worst team in the calendar year, Inter? The way they got knocked out by Schalke?
It's true.
No,
over the year, you'd have to say
that,
so.
But not because they have been a good ones. They've been quite bad, quite average, I would say. But still, they get a second place that was quite exciting for a while last year. And anyway, they went through easily in European Champions League. They had a lot of injuries. A very average season this year, I must recognize. But still,
Leonardo was shocking with them, especially in his tactics against Schalke, like you said, in the Champions League. I mean, you know, he managed to build up momentum, but he was shockingly poor when it came to tactics, and Milan knew that, you know?
Exactly.
When they let him go.
Well, he knows that. He's moved out of management.
Yeah, exactly. He knows that too. It's just not something that he wants to do. But also I want to touch on the fact that you said Max Allegri. Sorry, just to get back to that quickly. I also think that once you have an establishment as good as Milan, where they have a very set management, any coach can come into that and sort of find it much easier to settle. But other worst teams, what do you think about Fiorentina? Would you say they've been the greatest disappointment too?
Well, that was my second worst team in the selection, I would say, because actually they have such a better squad for the result they achieved in the past season, and they are achieving this one. But still, my worst team of the season is still Sampdoria, because we probably forgot the way they went down. They were relegated last year, but it's just unbelievable. They sold for few money in the end, Pazzini and Cassano. They were in the Champions League playoff. They went in second division, and still at the half of the season, no one could expect that. And actually, still now, they are still struggling. Even if that, for me, is the worst team, but not the biggest disappointment. For me, the biggest disappointment is actually something that probably will unplease you, Mina, but I go with Andrea Agnelli, because I was not expecting all this rage still about all the Calciopoli discussions.
14 million Juventus fans would disagree with you, who felt robbed in 2006.
I know, but there is a moment for everything. And I think that fans also have to upgrade in the way to have their attitude to football.
I know what you mean, but Moratti actually came out and said after the peace meeting that he found Agnelli to be a very great gentleman who perhaps doesn't sing from the same hymn sheet, but understands football in a way. And he seemed to not be very happy with the Del Valle brothers of Fiorentina. Rather, he thought they were the ones that sort of seemed enraged, or that's what seemed to be implied, whereas he was very happy with Agnelli, and I think Juventus fans are. But I do see your point. I know that that's caused huge controversy because he clings on to that. But Juventus, one of the greatest teams to have broken out this year?
Well,
potentially. I think they look the strongest team, despite Udinese's good run. I think they would probably still be favourites to win, especially if they manage to maybe have one or two interesting signings over the winter break.
They were associated to Tevez.
So the problem is, of course, that with Juventus, you cannot give them the same credit as you'd give somebody like Udinese or Napoli. He would come from much more humble background,
it's
a
funny
lot
you say
less
that,
money.
Because Napoli has spent just the same amount over the summer.
Yes, but your starting point is what matters, because if you spend 5
point
million
is
because your squad is already very, very good, then that's fine. But if your squad is not very good and you spend 5 million, that's huge. So, just spending over 1 year is not the right comparison. You have to look over 10, 15,
but
20
Napoli has consistently spent, although they do consistently make money, which also Juventus does. They've made losses too, but with Juventus, I would have to say that they've come out of Calciopoli. They've changed their team every single day, every single year rather. So they're constantly having to recreate this project. So to come from 7th 2 years in a row, and then to come first now and be undefeated in the top 4 leagues.
Yeah, but but where do you start? I mean, you say that 7th was the right position for them, and being first now is a huge achievement, or do you say it the other way around? 7th was a really underachievement. They should be first.
Sure.
So
I see that.
I think that for me, Napoli and Udinese would be the most exciting team of all, if there wasn't a big if, which was failing to get past a very poor, very nervous Arsenal in the Champions League playoffs. I think if they'd managed that, they would have done it all, but they failed, and quite miserably so. And that's the big question mark I've got behind this team.
The thing about Udinese is they have really amazing things. They have, they teach the wives of the players how to cook proper food. And
it's the same in Munich, by the way.
Really?
If you go to Spartak Moscow, you just get a chef, or maybe 2.
Well, that's what we should do. Tancredi, who do you think is going to win the Scudetto? In one word, please. One word.
Okay, as I said in last May,
that's a sentence, Tancredi.
Antonio Conte since Barry's time, Juventus.
Juventus. Woo. Okay, Andy?
Juve, I suppose.
Said with such disdain.
No, well, I just think a thing we didn't mention there is that the upswing by the new stadium. There's such a feel-good factor with that. I think that's a huge difference as well.
Okay, and you?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Juventus as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Tancredi. We hope to speak to you in the new year. Merry Christmas. Okay, I actually also think that it's Milan's to lose. To be honest, I think Milan will win it.
Nah.
But that's all we have, or that's all they're giving me anyway on Italy. But if you come back in a few minutes, then we'll be rounding off the rest of the best moments of the year. Speak to you soon. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we're going to go through all the ties from the Champions League, Europa League, and talk a little bit about the Euros. Champions League, any standout fixtures for you?
I have to say it's the English-Italian duels that really are the most exciting.
You think so?
Yes, of course. I mean, Chelsea-Napoli is a brilliant lineup, and Milan. Arsenal slightly less so because there's a bit of familiarity. They've faced each other before, but I think Napoli, with all the excitement that they bring, with a fantastic stadium against a Chelsea that are perhaps a little bit vulnerable, I think it's shaping up to be a real crack.
I was about that close to slitting my wrists when I found out about it. Well, because you know what the saying says: Italy beats Spain, Spain beats England, England beats Italy. So.
Oh, but it's all cyclical, of course. English teams could never beat Italian teams in the 90s, and I think Napoli are going to be a huge challenge for Chelsea, and I think the fact that they're going to find it pretty hard to crack the top 3 from where they are in the league at the moment means they can put more energy into that. So
they depend a lot on their first team, so that's why they have to manoeuvre sort of in the league, and they're not playing all their favourite players.
Yeah, we've got to mention Inter as well, because I think that's a really attractive tie against Marseille. And the last time Marseille got to the UEFA Cup final in 2004, when Didier Drogba had that incredible season there, they beat Inter on the way to that. So it's a good omen for them as well.
Why are there so many small teams, would you say, this season?
Small teams?
Smaller teams than we're used to when it comes to giants,
Well, I think a few have become a bit complacent with the first stage of the Champions League, but also you have to say the standard has come up as well. You looked at Manchester United's draw; it looked an easy group, but Benfica and Basel was so positive, and there's a lot of ability in both those teams. And I think with the teams that Sir Alex Ferguson picked for those games, he completely failed to recognise that. Chelsea nearly got caught out as well. So I would expect a lot of these bigger teams who've missed this year to come back a lot stronger next year.
Okay, so now they're all going to be in Europa League, and Alex Ferguson said it was punishment.
Penalty.
But they've actually come up with some really interesting ties in Europa League, perhaps even better than the Champions League ones.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's no surprise to those who actually watch the Europa League, and I count myself in their camp. Yes, not as a fan, because I like to see different teams. I mean, it's always in the Champions League, people used to complain it's always the same teams. Then Europa League, they complain, it's all these small teams. We don't want to watch them either. So you can't have it exactly. So it actually shows you that there are a lot of really good teams in the Europa League. Even if you take away all the parachuted teams that just come in now, there's some really attractive teams in there. And if you don't want to see, let's say, Lazio Atletico, what are you doing watching football? That's a really exciting game. Whether that's a Champions League game, a Europa League game, doesn't matter. It's a really great time.
But you have to say, this time more than any other time, there's some really terrific lineups, including that one that you just mentioned, and then there's Porto, Manchester City.
That's the one, really, isn't it? Because it's the holders against probably the most talented squad who really want to win it. Mancini said, we haven't won anything for years. This is an important competition. We're going to go all out to win it. It's quite juxtaposed to Sir Alex Ferguson's attitude. And I'm sure United will have a go when it comes to it, but City are really going to have a go at this. And
the thing for City is it's actually quite important for them to have a decent run, because they need to improve their UEFA coefficient to get a better draw when they get back into the Champions League. Otherwise, they might be in a situation where they always get really tough group and can't get out of it. So growing your experience, but also your status as far as numbers are concerned, the Europa League is very important, as Seville have shown. They won the Europa League, UEFA Cup twice, and of course they were automatically seeded, had an easier group, etc. City need to do the same.
Speaking of tough groups, going into the Euros, if we look at actually Group A is the easiest group, whereas Group B is the group of death. If we can have a look at them, that's Group A, would you consider for the Euros to be one of the easiest? Do you think it's a bit unfair to have a group like that?
Well, no, it's not unfair, but it's a great draw for all 4 teams in it, because they all look at it and think, we can really win this, including Poland. And, you know, as a neutral, you'd actually want one of the hosts to do well. So that's perhaps not
true.
a bad thing.
But it's a shame when you look at Group B, which has such amazing countries on it, that only 2 can go from it.
Yeah, I think my son's pretty chuffed because I'm following Portugal and he knows I'll be home as quickly as possible. So he's really pleased with that one.
You never know. I think the Dutch are vulnerable. You know, you look at the back 4, not really that exciting, and they have tremendous talent going forward. But I think especially a team like Portugal, who make it quite negative, make it quite difficult to beat them. Then, you know, there's the history of the 2006 last 16 battle, or shall we say war.
It could be a 5-a-side this time.
So,
there's also
you know,
Group C, which in my opinion is probably one of the most entertaining, only because it's got Spain, who won the World Cup, and then the 4 years before that would be Italy. No one really wants to face Trapattoni's Republic of Ireland.
Again, it will be really interesting to see how Spain go, because if you think how slowly they started the World Cup, you know, how are they going to approach this? They've been very, very poor in friendlies, and you can't really afford a poor start in the European Championship.
No.
Of course, this is the last.
The first game is Italy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And you know, this is the last tournament where it's just going to be 16. It's going to be 24 from Euro 2016. This could be the biggest challenge of this Spanish dynasty, I think.
What about England, France in Group D? Do you think that's going to be their toughest challenge in that group?
Yeah, well, I think the way France are looking at it is they don't have Rooney for that game, and
and everyone's just clapping.
That is a big deal for them.
Yeah.
But you know, you've no idea what France or what England are going to turn up. They're both still works in progress, and you know, France have come a long way under Laurent Blanc, but they look really, really nervous in that last qualifier against Bosnia, who of course ended up getting pelted in the playoff against Portugal.
Out of that one, who do you think will win, France or England?
I think it'll be a draw that first game, but I think both will qualify.
And the tournament?
Germany.
Ooh, Raph?
I'd like to say Germany, but I'm afraid it might be a Spanish again.
I think it's going to be Germany too. I think they've got a great talent.
Oh no, that's it.
Anyway,
you've jinxed it. No chance for us.
So. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully we'll be back in the new year, and I'll be joined. Actually, not hopefully, rather, my producer just got really upset. What do you mean, hopefully? We'll definitely be back in the new year, and I'm sure we'll still have Raph dressed all in black yet again, and Andy, if he'd like to join us again. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll leave you with a bit of goals to enjoy. Thank you very much.